In the Appalachian Mountains, there is an old rule that locals follow without question. If you hear a voice calling your name from the woods, you do not answer it. You do not shout back. You do not respond quietly. You do not even turn your head to look. People in Appalachia do not treat this rule like folklore or superstition. They treat it like common sense, the same way you would treat fire or a steep cliff. Outsiders often laugh when they hear it, because no one ever explains why. The warning is always the same, repeated in the same serious tone, as if explaining it would somehow make things worse. The Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest mountains on Earth. Long before roads, towns, or borders, these hills were already standing. The forests are thick and layered, with trees growing so close together that sunlight struggles to reach the ground. Even during the day, parts of the woods feel dim and closed off. At night, the darkness becomes complete, heavy, and almost physical. Sound does not behave normally there. A snapped branch might echo from nowhere, while a scream can vanish without a trace. Locals say the mountains carry voices, and sometimes they carry them too well. In West Virginia, especially in the more remote areas, stories are passed down quietly from one generation to the next. They are not told for entertainment. They are told as warnings. Children grow up hearing them before they ever learn to hike alone. They are taught that if they get lost, they should stay still and stay silent. If they hear footsteps, they should hide. And if someone calls their name from the trees, no matter how familiar the voice sounds, they must ignore it. The reason given is always vague. Some things, they say, learn you when you answer. I was not from Appalachia, and I did not grow up with those stories. To me, the mountains were just mountains. Beautiful, quiet, perfect place to camp alone and disconnect for a few days. I chose a remote area in West Virginia, far from highways and towns, where cell service disappeared miles before the trailhead. I wanted isolation. I wanted silence. I did not understand how different silence feels when it does not belong to you. Before heading into the mountains, I stopped at a small gas station to grab supplies. While I was paying, an older man noticed my camping gear and asked where I was headed. When I told him, his expression changed instantly. The casual look on his face disappeared, replaced by something tighter and more serious. He told me not to wander at night. I joked and said I had a flashlight and a map. He shook his head slowly, like I had missed the point entirely. Leaning closer, he lowered his voice and told me that if I heard someone call my name from the woods, I should not answer. When I asked why, he did not respond. He paid for his coffee, wished me luck in a way that did not sound sincere, and walked out. At the time, I dismissed it. Warnings without explanations are easy to ignore. They feel optional, like advice instead of rules. That night, as I sat alone in my campsite surrounded by trees, the forest was unnaturally quiet. No insects buzzed. No wind moved the branches. Even the fire sounded too loud, its cracks sharp against the silence. I remember thinking how peaceful it was, how still everything felt. I did not realize that the quiet was not empty. Something in those woods was already listening. By the time I finished setting up my campsite, the sun was already sinking behind the ridgeline. In Appalachia, night comes faster than you expect. One moment the forest is dim but visible, and the next it feels like the light has been switched off completely. The trees swallowed the last traces of daylight, leaving behind long shadows that stretched between the trunks. I was miles from the nearest town, surrounded by forest in every direction. No engines, no distant traffic, just layers of trees climbing the mountainsides, closing me in. I chose the spot because it felt untouched. No nearby campsites, no marked trails close by. The kind of place that made you feel small in a good way, like the world had room to breathe again. The air was cool and damp, carrying the smell of soil and leaves. Every sound felt amplified. My boots crunching on gravel, the zipper of my tent, the strike of a match. Each noise seemed to hang in the air longer than it should have, as if the forest was waiting for the next one. As darkness settled in, the woods remained strangely quiet. I expected insects, frogs, something to break the silence, but there was almost nothing. The stillness pressed in, thick and uncomfortable. felt less like peace and more like anticipation. I caught myself listening harder than necessary, straining to hear movement that never came. I told myself it was normal, that animals were keeping their distance, that I was just not used to being this far from civilization. I made a small fire and sat beside it, watching the flames flicker against the tree trunks. Beyond the firelight, the forest was a solid wall of black. The light did not fade gradually. It stopped, just a few feet from where I sat. The darkness swallowed everything whole. I remember thinking how easy it would be for someone to stand just outside the light and never be seen. The thought made me uncomfortable, but I brushed it off. Later, as the night grew colder, I crawled into my tent. The fabric felt thin, useless against the vastness outside. I lay there listening to my own breathing, to the soft crackle of the dying fire. Time stretched. Minutes felt longer. The silence began to feel deliberate, like the forest was holding its breath. That was when I heard it. First, I thought it was my imagination, a sound so faint it barely registered. A whisper, carried on the air, drifting between the trees. I held my breath and listened harder. The sound came again, clearer this time, shaped into a single word. My name. It was not shouted. It was not urgent. It was calm. Familiar. Spoken perfectly, with the exact tone and rhythm of my own voice. The sound did not come from the campsite. It came from deeper in the woods, just beyond the reach of the firelight. Every warning I had heard that day came rushing back at once. The man at the gas station, the way his voice dropped, the way he would not explain. My heart started pounding, loud enough that I was afraid it could be heard. I told myself there was a logical explanation. Someone hiking nearby, a trick of sound. My mind playing games in the dark. Then the whisper came again, closer this time. It said my name the same way a friend would, as if it knew me well. I sat up slowly, every muscle tense, staring into the trees where the sound had come from. The forest remained still. No footsteps, no movement, just the quiet, waiting patiently. And that was when I made my first mistake. I stayed frozen for a long time after that second whisper, sitting upright in my tent with my heart hammering so hard it made my chest ache. I told myself not to move, not to respond, not even to breathe too loudly. I remembered the warning exactly as it was said. Do not answer. It sounded simple when spoken in daylight. In the dark, with your own name drifting through the trees, it became the hardest thing in the world. The voice did not sound threatening. That was the worst part. It sounded patient, familiar, as if whoever was calling me had all the time they needed. I tried to convince myself it was a trick of acoustics. The mountains were known for strange echoes. Sound could bend and travel in ways that made no sense. Maybe someone was camping farther down the trail. Maybe they were calling to someone else, and my brain had filled in the rest. I repeated these explanations silently, over and over like a shield. Still, my eyes stayed locked on the dark space beyond the firelight, waiting for something to move. The whisper came again, and this time it was closer. Not loud, not rushed, just closer. It spoke my name the way someone would if they were standing just a few steps away, trying not to startle me. The tone was gentle, almost kind. I felt a strange pull in my chest, an urge to respond without thinking. Felt rude not to, unnatural to ignore someone calling you so calmly. My mouth went dry as I clenched my jaw to keep from answering. That was when I realized something was wrong with the silence. The forest was not just quiet. It was empty. No insects, no night birds, no distant rustling of animals. It felt like everything alive had pulled back, leaving only me and whatever was out there. Even the fire had burned low, its light weaker now, shrinking instead of pushing back the darkness. I leaned forward slightly, careful not to make noise, and listened. I wanted to hear footsteps, branches snapping, anything that sounded human. There was nothing. The voice existed without movement, without breath, without any sound that should have come before or after it. It was as if the words were being placed directly into the air, perfectly formed. The whisper spoke again, and this time it did not use my name. Come here, The words were soft, almost friendly, but they sent a cold wave through my body. No direction was given. No explanation. Just an invitation. The voice did not come from one spot anymore. It felt spread out, like it was coming from between the trees instead of behind them. I realized I could not point to its source even if I tried. I should have stayed inside the tent. I should have buried my head and waited for morning. But fear does strange things to your sense of control. Part of me believed that if I could just see what was out there, the fear would disappear. Monsters feel less powerful when you can look at them. That thought, more than the voice itself, is what pushed me to act. Slowly, I unzipped the tent. The sound was painfully loud in the quiet, and I winced as the opening widened. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of damp earth and something else I could not place. I stepped out onto the ground, the fire now little more than glowing embers. Beyond them, the forest waited. Tall trunks stood in uneven rows, their shapes stretching upward and vanishing into darkness. My name was whispered again. This time, it came from just beyond the trees. I took a step forward before I realized what I was doing. My body moved on instinct, drawn by the sound of my name as if it were a thread pulling me through the dark. The ground felt uneven beneath my boots, soft with old leaves and damp soil. Each step felt louder than it should have. Yet the forest around me remained completely still. No branches moved, no animals fled. It was as if the woods were frozen, holding everything in place. I stopped just short of the tree line, the last of the fire's glow at my back. The darkness ahead was thick, layered, and endless. I could not see more than a few feet in front of me, but I felt watched from every direction. My skin prickled, and a deep sense of wrongness settled in my chest. I opened my mouth to call out, to ask who was there, then clamped it shut. The warning came back to me too late, sharp and clear. Do not answer. That was when I saw it. At first, it looked like a man standing between the trees. Tall, still, almost blending into the shadows. For a brief, dangerous second, relief washed over me. The shape was familiar enough to trick my brain into relaxing. Then it shifted slightly and the illusion broke. Its legs were too long, bent at the wrong angle. Its shoulders were too wide, stretching the skin across them so tightly it looked painful. The body was covered in patches of coarse, dark hair, but the skin beneath was pale and pulled thin, like it did not belong there. As my eyes adjusted, the head came into focus. The face was wrong in ways I struggled to understand. The jaw jutted forward into the shape of a muzzle, but human features still clung to it, distorted and stretched. Its eyes reflected what little light remained, shining faintly from deep sockets. They were fixed on me with an intensity that made it hard to breathe. This was not an animal staring. This was something studying me. I stood frozen, unable to look away. The thing did not move closer. It did not snarl or growl. It simply stood there, perfectly balanced between man and wolf, as if caught mid-change. The longer I looked, the more details emerged. Long fingers ended in claws that curved slightly inward. Its chest rose and fell so slowly it was almost unnoticeable. It was alive, but it was conserving something. Then it spoke. Come closer. The words did not come from its mouth. I saw its jaws remain still, teeth exposed in a half-open shape that never changed. The voice came from everywhere at once, filling the space between the trees and sliding into my ears. It was still my voice, still perfect. Hearing it come from that thing broke something inside me. Fear crashed over me in a way I had never felt before, raw and overwhelming. Every instinct screamed at me to run. I stumbled backward, nearly falling as my heel caught on a root. The moment I moved, the thing reacted. Its head tilted slightly, like a predator tracking prey. It took one step forward, then another, its movements smooth and silent. No crunch of leaves, no snap of branches. The woods did not acknowledge its presence at all. I turned and ran. I did not look back at first. I could not. I ran toward the dying fire, toward the thin safety of my tent. My lungs burning as panic pushed me faster than I thought possible. I expected to hear something behind me, heavy footsteps, panting, a growl. There was nothing. The silence was worse, because I could feel it gaining ground without making a sound. The moment I broke into a full sprint, the forest seemed to wrap around me. Trees blurred past in uneven lines, their branches reaching out like arms as I ran. My breath came in sharp bursts, loud in my ears, but behind me there was nothing. No pursuit, no crashing footsteps, no signs of movement at all. That absence of sound convinced me, for a brief and dangerous moment, that I might be alone again. That thought nearly slowed me down. I am glad it did not. I could feel it behind me, not through sound but through pressure, like the air itself had grown heavier. The space at my back felt occupied, crowded by something moving far too close. My instincts screamed that if I stumbled, if I hesitated for even a second, it would be on me. The forest floor dipped suddenly, and I nearly lost my footing. I threw my arms out to steady myself and kept running, my heart pounding so hard it made my vision blur at the edges. The campsite came into view ahead, the weak orange glow of embers marking it like a lifeline. I pushed harder, ignoring the burning in my legs. I dared a glance over my shoulder, and the sight nearly stopped my heart. The thing was there, weaving between the trees with unnatural ease. It did not run the way an animal would. It did not charge or lunge. It moved in long, fluid strides, covering ground without effort. Its body bent and shifted in ways that made my stomach turn, limbs stretching and compressing as if bones meant nothing to it. Its eyes were locked on me. There was no anger in its expression. No hunger. Only certainty. It knew where I was going. It knew I would try to escape. And it knew somehow that I was not finished yet. I reached the campsite and nearly tripped over my own gear. I dove past the fire pit and grabbed my car keys, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped them. I did not bother packing. I did not bother with the tent. I just ran for the car, my chest tight with panic. The silence followed me all the way, thick and pressing, as if the forest itself was closing ranks behind the thing. I fumbled with the door, yanked it open, and threw myself inside. The moment the door slammed shut, the pressure lifted. Sound rushed back in all at once. My own breathing, the faint crackle of embers, the night air moving through the trees. I locked the doors and started the engine with trembling hands, the headlights slicing through the darkness ahead. For a few seconds, nothing happened. Then, just beyond the reach of the headlights, I saw it standing at the edge of the trees. It did not approach. It did not retreat. It simply watched as I backed the car away, its outline half lost in shadow. The moment I turned onto the narrow road and the forest fell away behind me, the shape was gone. I did not stop driving until the sky began to lighten with the first hint of morning. By then, exhaustion had settled deep into my bones, heavy and numbing. I told myself it was over, that whatever had happened was tied to that place, that forest, that night. I was wrong, because leaving the mountains did not mean it stopped following. I did not go back to the campsite. I did not tell anyone what had happened. By the time I reached a small town at the edge of the mountains, daylight had fully broken, and the world looked normal again. Cars passed me on the road. People stood outside diners drinking coffee. The ordinary rhythm of life made the night feel unreal, like something my mind had invented under stress. I clung to that explanation because it was easier than accepting the alternative. Monsters belong in the woods, not in daylight. I drove straight home and tried to return to my routine. I slept in my own bed. I went to work. I talked to friends. On the surface, everything went back to normal, but something underneath had changed. I felt watched in places where I had never felt unsafe before. Empty rooms felt crowded. Silence felt intentional. Every time I heard someone say my name, my stomach tightened, and I found myself scanning the space around me before responding. Weeks passed, and the memories began to blur at the edges. The details softened. The fear dulled. I started to believe I had escaped. The Appalachian Mountains became just a bad memory, a story I would never tell because it sounded too unbelievable. I avoided thinking about the thing between the trees, about its still mouth, about the way it had moved without sound. Life has a way of pushing terror aside when nothing happens afterward. Then one night, I woke up just before dawn with the uneasy feeling that someone was standing outside my bedroom window. I lay still, listening. My house was quiet. No footsteps. No voices. I told myself it was nothing more than a bad dream lingering too long. Slowly, I turned my head toward the window. Moonlight spilled through the curtains, casting pale lines across the floor. That was when I saw the marks. Deep scratches ran down the glass, long and uneven, as if something with claws had dragged them slowly across the surface. The glass was not broken, but it was gouged badly enough that I could see white lines carved into it. My chest tightened, and a cold wave of recognition washed over me. These were not random marks. They were deliberate. My hands shook as I pulled the curtain back a little more. That was when I saw the words. They were scratched directly into the window, uneven and jagged, each letter cut with careful effort. You didn't finish the walk. The room felt smaller after that, like the walls had moved in closer. My heart pounded as I backed away from the window, every instinct screaming that whatever had written those words could still be nearby. I did not hear anything outside. No movement. No breathing. Just the faint hum of the house settling around me. The message was clear. It knew where I lived, and it believed our encounter was not over. I did not sleep after that. I stayed awake until the sun rose, watching the window from across the room, half expecting to see a shape move past the glass. Nothing did. By morning, the scratches were still there, undeniable in the light of day. I covered them with cardboard and duct tape, not because it would stop anything, but because I could not stand to look at them. Seeing the words made the memory feel too real, too close. I knew then that I could not pretend anymore. Whatever I had encountered in the mountains had followed me, and I needed answers. There was only one place to look for them: Appalachia. Not the land itself, but the people who had lived with its stories for generations. I started researching quietly, careful not to draw attention. Old forums.
Local archive.
Faded newspaper clippings scanned and forgotten online. The same warnings kept appearing, always phrased differently, but always circling the same idea. Do not answer voices in the woods. Eventually, I found references to something locals called the Wolf Man. The name changed depending on the county, sometimes called the Walker, sometimes the name taker, sometimes not named at all. What stayed consistent were the details. It was said to appear on two legs, standing like a man, but shaped like a wolf in the wrong places. It could copy voices perfectly, especially the voices of the people it was hunting. And once it learned your name, it could carry it anywhere. Older accounts described it as a boundary creature. It did not simply roam. It waited, called. If someone followed its voice willingly, it claimed them completely. If they ran before finishing the walk, the creature marked them instead. Marked them as unfinished. The stories said those people were never truly safe again. Distance did not matter. Time did not matter. The mountains remembered their names, and the Wolf Man carried them forward. One detail stood out more than the rest. According to the stories, the creature did not kill quickly. It did not attack the first time. It wanted recognition. It wanted you to accept its presence. That was why it used your voice. That was why it asked you to come closer. Speaking back, even once, was considered an invitation. Turning toward the voice was the first step. Following it was the second. The walk had to be completed. I thought about the moment I stepped out of my tent, about how close I had come to speaking, about how I had run instead of staying. The words on my window made more sense now. I had started something I did not finish. According to the stories, that left me in a dangerous place. Not claimed, not free. Some accounts mentioned that people in my position would continue to hear their names whispered, even far from the mountains. The voice would return during quiet moments, late at night, early in the morning, always calm, always patient. It would wait for a response, no matter how long it took. As I read those words on my screen, my phone buzzed with a new notification. The sound made me jump. I told myself I was being paranoid, that fear was filling in gaps that logic should occupy. Still, I did not answer the message right away. I stared at the dark reflection in my screen, half expecting to see something behind me. The stories all ended the same way, with a final walk. After reading those stories, I stopped going out at night. I avoided quiet places. I kept the television on while I slept, filling the house with noise so silence could not settle in. For a while, it worked. Days passed without incident, and the fear dulled into something manageable. I almost convinced myself that knowing the rules had given me control, that as long as I ignored the voice, whatever followed me would eventually give up. That belief did not last. The first time I heard it again, I was alone in my apartment late at night. The television was on low volume, and rain tapped softly against the windows. I was half asleep on the couch when I heard my name spoken clearly from the hallway. It was not a whisper this time. It was conversational, casual, like someone checking if I was still awake. The sound came from inside my home, from a place where no one else should have been. I did not respond. My body locked up as I stared down the dark hallway. The voice did not repeat itself right away. It waited. The patience in that silence was worse than the sound itself. My heart pounded as I strained to hear movement. There was none. No footsteps. No door opening. The apartment remained exactly as it had been moments before. Then it spoke again. Come closer. The words were calm, almost gentle. I could hear my own voice in them, every inflection perfect. I bit down hard on my lip and stayed where I was, forcing myself not to move. The television droned on, the sound suddenly thin and useless. The voice did not grow angry. It did not threaten. It simply repeated the invitation once more from slightly closer than before. That was when I understood something the stories had not made clear enough. The Wolf Man did not need the woods to reach me anymore. The mountains were where it learned my name. Now it could use it anywhere. Silence was its doorway. Familiarity was its tool. It knew I would be tempted to look, to confirm, to prove to myself that nothing was there. I stayed on that couch until morning, my eyes fixed on the hallway, my muscles aching from tension. When the sun finally rose, the voice stopped. Just like before, it left without a trace. No marks, no evidence, just the memory of it being there. From then on, it came and went unpredictably. Sometimes weeks would pass without incident. Other times, I would hear my name in the grocery store aisle, whispered from behind me, or spoken softly while I sat alone in my car. Every time I followed the same rule. Do not answer, do not turn, do not acknowledge it in any way. But each time it returned, it felt closer. And I began to understand what the final walk meant. The stories all agreed on one thing. The longer the Wolf Man waited, the worse it became. It did not rush. It did not need to. Time worked in its favor. Every unanswered call, every ignored whisper, was not a failure. It was pressure. The creature learned patterns. It studied routines. It waited for exhaustion, for fear to dull into habit. When that happened, people made mistakes. I started to notice changes in myself. I was always tired. Sleep came in short, broken pieces. I avoided using my name whenever possible, even introducing me with nicknames or silence. I kept my head down in public, afraid that if I acknowledged someone calling out, it might not be human. Living like that wears you down. Fear becomes part of your breathing, quiet but constant. One night, months after the scratches appeared, the power went out during a storm. The house fell into total darkness, the kind that swallows shapes and distances. Rain hammered against the roof, and thunder rolled through the sky, shaking the walls. I sat in the living room, frozen, listening to the storm and the deep quiet between each crack of thunder. I told myself the noise would keep it away. I told myself I was safe. That was when I heard my name from the back door. It was closer than it had ever been. Not whispered, not distant. It sounded like someone standing just outside, speaking through the glass. The voice carried a hint of disappointment this time, as if it had waited long enough. My chest tightened, and I felt an overwhelming urge to respond, to shout back, to end the waiting. I realized then that the walk was not just physical. It was psychological. Each time I heard the voice and stayed silent, I was still moving forward, step by step, toward something inevitable. The handle on the back door rattled once. Slow. Testing. I stood up without thinking, my body acting before my mind could catch up. For a brief moment, I believed I could end it by confronting whatever was there. That if I opened the door and faced it, the waiting would stop. My hand hovered inches from the handle, my reflection shaking in the dark glass. The voice spoke again, closer now, pressed right against the door. "You're almost done." I stepped back, terror snapping me out of the trance. The meaning hit me all at once. It did not want me to open the door. It wanted me to come to it, to choose the walk, to finish what I had started in the mountains. I backed away, my heart pounding, and the rattling stopped. The voice faded into the storm, leaving the house empty and silent once more. I did not sleep that night. By morning, I understood the truth the locals had tried to warn me about. Once the Wolf Man knows your name, the walk never really ends. You only decide where it finishes. I left my home a week later. I did not pack much and just enough to keep moving. The stories never said running would save you, but they all agreed on one thing. Staying still made it easier for the Wolf Man to find you. I avoided remote places. I avoided silence. I lived surrounded by noise, people, and light. For a time, that seemed to help. The voice came less often. Sometimes months passed without hearing my name. I almost believed distance had weakened it. But Appalachia does not forget. The mountains are not just a place. They are a memory, and once you are part of that memory, you are carried with it. I learned that the Wolf Man does not chase forever. It waits for the moment you feel safe enough to slip. For the moment you answer without thinking. For the moment you turn your head when you should not. I still hear my name sometimes. In crowded places. In empty rooms, and always spoken perfectly. Always calm. Always patient. It never sounds angry. It never threatens. It does not need to. It knows I remember the rule now. It knows I understand what happens if I break it. That is why I am telling you this. If you ever find yourself in the Appalachian Mountains, and the woods grow too quiet, pay attention. If you hear a voice calling your name from the trees, do not answer it. Do not look for the source. Do not follow the sound, no matter how familiar it feels. The moment you respond, the walk begins. And once it begins, the mountains will remember you. Some people say the Wolf Man is just a story and a warning wrapped in fear to keep people from wandering into the dark. I used to believe that too. Belief is a luxury you lose once something learns your name. If you are listening to this late at night, and you think you hear someone calling you from another room, stay where you are. Let the silence pass. Let the voice fade. Because if it sounds like you and it knows your name, it is already closer than you think. And it is waiting for you to finish the walk.